The spaceship Eclipse drifted silently through the vast emptiness of space, its sleek metallic hull reflecting faint glimmers of distant stars. Inside, a small crew of 5 humans moved about their tasks with quiet efficiency. They had been sent on a mission to explore a mysterious planet at the edge of known space. The planet emitted strange energy readings that scientists back on Earth couldn't explain, and the crew's job was to investigate. Rachel sat alone in the engineering bay, her fingers moving deftly over the control panel as she ran diagnostics on the ship's systems. She was petite, with soft brown hair tied back into a loose ponytail and glasses perched on her nose. Her presence was calm but unassuming, almost fading into the background. This wasn't unusual for Rachel. She preferred staying out of the spotlight. But it also meant people often overlooked her, or worse, underestimated her. Jake, the pilot, leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. His broad shoulders and confident smirk made him seem larger than life. "Still tinkering with those wires, huh?" he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "You know, if we ever get attacked by aliens, you're not gonna save us by fixing some old circuit." Rachel didn't look up. She had grown used to Jake's jabs over the months they'd spent traveling together. "If we ever get attacked?" "By aliens," she replied evenly. "You might want your engines working properly so you can fly us out of here." Jake chuckled, though there was no warmth in it. "Yeah, sure. I'll just leave all the important stuff to the weak link." He emphasized the nickname he and the others had given her behind her back. It had started as a joke, but now it stuck like glue, making Rachel feel smaller every time someone said it. Emily, the ship's medic, walked in moments later, carrying a clipboard. Unlike Jake, Emily treated Rachel kindly, often trying to include her in conversations or offer words of encouragement. "How's everything holding up, Rachel?" she asked, glancing at the readouts on the screen. "Fine," Rachel muttered, avoiding eye contact. "Everything's running smoothly." "That's good," Emily said, smiling warmly before heading off to check on the rest of the crew. As the hours passed, the Eclipse approached its destination, a desolate-looking planet, shrouded in swirling clouds of dust and gas. Its surface appeared barren, dotted with jagged mountains and deep craters. Yet beneath this harsh exterior lay the source of the strange energy readings that had caught Earth's attention. Captain Lewis gathered the crew in the main cabin to brief them on the plan. A tall man with graying hair and a commanding voice. He exuded authority. "All right, team," he began, pacing slowly. "We've arrived at our target. Initial scans show what looks like some kind of structure near the equator. We'll land nearby and investigate. Stay alert, we don't know what we're dealing with." Jake cracked his knuckles eagerly. Finally, some action. I was getting tired of staring at empty space. Rachel stayed quiet, listening intently. While keeping her thoughts to herself, she knew better than to speak up during these meetings. Her ideas were rarely taken seriously anyway. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease growing in her chest. Something about this mission felt off. After landing, the crew suited up and stepped onto the alien terrain. The ground was rocky and uneven, covered in fine red sand that shifted underfoot. The air was thin, requiring them to use oxygen tanks connected to their helmets. As they trudged toward the structure Captain Lewis had mentioned, the landscape grew increasingly eerie. Strange symbols carved into the rocks seemed to glow faintly, pulsating with an otherworldly light. When they reached the structure, everyone stopped in awe. It was massive, towering above them like an ancient temple from another world. Its walls were smooth and black, shimmering as if alive. Intricate patterns adorned the entrance, twisting and curling in ways that defied logic. "This is incredible," whispered Emily, snapping photos with her handheld device. "It's like nothing I've ever seen." Jake smirked, stepping forward confidently. "Let's go inside and see what secrets it holds." They entered cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The interior was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from the glowing symbols etched into the walls. The air felt heavier here, charged with an invisible energy that prickled their skin even through their suits. Suddenly, movement caught their attention. From the shadows emerged figures tall, insectoid creatures with elongated limbs and razor-sharp claws. Their eyes glowed a fierce yellow, scanning the intruders with predatory precision. These were the Varric, an alien race unlike anything humanity had encountered before. One of the Varric stepped forward, its head tilting curiously as it studied the humans. Then, using broken English transmitted telepathically, it spoke. "You, weak, leave now." Jake instinctively reached for his weapon, but Captain Lewis held up a hand to stop him. "Wait," he said firmly. "We mean no harm. We're explorers." The Varric leader ignored him, focusing instead on Rachel. It pointed one clawed finger directly at her. "Weak link," it hissed, repeating the cruel nickname Jake had given her. The insult stung more than usual, coming from a creature so alien. Yet eerily aware of her insecurities, Rachel clenched her fists, forcing herself to stand tall despite the humiliation. She wasn't going to let these creatures or anyone else define her anymore. Tensions escalated quickly. Jake, unable to contain his aggression, fired a warning shot at the ceiling. The loud crack echoed through the chamber, startling the Varric. In response, they lunged forward with terrifying speed, their claws slashing through the air. Chaos erupted. The crew scrambled to defend themselves, firing their weapons wildly. Captain Lewis shouted orders, trying to maintain order. But panic had already set in. Amid the confusion, one of the crew members, a young technician named Daniel, was struck by a Varric claw. He cried out in pain as blood seeped through his suit. Rachel acted without thinking. Ignoring the danger around her, she rushed to Daniel's side and applied pressure to his wound, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Emily joined her seconds later, helping stabilize him as best they could. "Fall back," Captain Lewis bellowed, realizing the fight was hopeless. Reluctantly, Jake obeyed, covering their retreat as they fled back to the Eclipse. Once aboard, they sealed the hatch and prepared for takeoff, leaving the Varric behind. Back on the ship, the mood was somber. Daniel lay unconscious in the medical bay, his condition critical. Jake paced angrily, blaming Rachel for distracting him during the attack. "If you hadn't frozen up, maybe we wouldn't be in this mess," he snapped. Rachel bit her lip, guilt washing over her. Maybe he was right. Maybe she really was the weak link. But then Emily placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Don't listen to him," she said softly. "You saved Daniel's life." "That takes courage, Rachel. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." For the first time in a long while, Rachel allowed herself to believe those words. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't let fear dictate her actions anymore. The Eclipse hovered silently above the alien planet, its engines humming softly as the crew tried to make sense of what had just happened. The encounter with the Varric had left everyone shaken, their confidence rattled by the sheer speed and ferocity of the insectoid creatures. Inside the ship, tension hung thick in the air, weighing down every conversation. Rachel sat alone in the engineering bay again, staring at the data logs from their brief exploration. Her mind raced with questions. Why had the Varric singled her out? What did they mean when they called her the weak link? And why had the glowing symbols on the temple walls seemed to pulse brighter whenever she got close to them? She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this mission than anyone realized. Emily walked in, holding a cup of steaming coffee. She offered it to Rachel with a small smile. "You've been quiet since we got back," she said gently. "Are you okay?" Rachel hesitated before taking the coffee. "I don't know," she admitted. "I keep thinking about those aliens. They knew something about me, something I don't even understand myself." Emily nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe it's not about being weak," she suggested. "Maybe they saw something else. Something important." Rachel glanced at her, surprised by the kindness in Emily's words. It wasn't often someone believed in her like that. Still, doubt lingered. "Even if they did, does it matter? Jake's right, I froze out there. If I hadn't been so scared, maybe Daniel wouldn't be hurt." Emily placed a hand on Rachel's shoulder. "You can't blame yourself for everything. You saved Daniel's life. That counts for something. Don't let Jake get into your head. He's just angry because he doesn't know how to fix things." Before Rachel could respond, Jake stormed into the room, his face flushed with frustration. "We need to talk," he said sharply, looking directly at Rachel. "This isn't over. We can't just run away and pretend nothing happened." Captain Lewis followed closely behind him, his expression grim. "Jake thinks we should go back to the temple and confront the Varric," the captain explained. "He believes we can take them down if we're prepared." Rachel felt her stomach tighten. "That's insane," she blurted out before she could stop herself. "They're too strong." "We barely escaped last time. Going back would be suicide." Jake smirked, crossing his arms. "Oh, here we go again. The weak link thinks we should hide instead of fighting. Typical." "That's enough, Jake," Captain Lewis said firmly, cutting him off. "Rachel has a point. Charging in blindly won't solve anything. We need to think carefully about our next move." But Jake wasn't convinced. "Thinking won't save us," he shot back. "Those aliens are dangerous. If we don't deal with them now, they'll come after us later. We have to strike first while we still can." The argument continued, voices rising as tempers flared. Emily tried to mediate, but no one seemed willing to listen. Finally, Rachel stood up, surprising everyone with her sudden determination. "Fine," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside her. "If you want to fight, then at least let me analyze the data we collected. Maybe there's something useful in the readings that can help us understand what we're dealing with." For a moment, the room fell silent. Jake raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "And what makes you think you'll find anything useful?" Rachel met his gaze without flinching. "Because someone needs to try. Running around with guns won't work if we don't know what we're up against." To her surprise, Captain Lewis nodded in agreement. "She's right," he said. "We need all the information we can get before making any decisions. Rachel, see what you can uncover. In the meantime, the rest of us will prepare the ship in case we need to leave quickly." As the meeting ended, Rachel returned to her station, determined to prove she wasn't useless. She pored over the data, replaying recordings of the glowing symbols and studying the energy patterns emitted by the temple. Hours passed, and just when exhaustion began to set in, she noticed something unusual, a faint signal embedded within the readings. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Rachel called Emily over to take a look. "Do you see this?" she asked, pointing at the screen. "It's some kind of pattern. Do you think it's part of their language?" Emily leaned in, her brow furrowing as she studied the waveform. "It's possible," she said slowly. "If we can decode it, maybe we can figure out what the Varric were trying to tell us." Together they worked tirelessly, piecing together fragments of meaning from the alien script. Each symbol seemed to correspond to a specific sound or concept, forming a rudimentary translation key. By the time they finished, dawn had broken outside the ship's windows, casting pale light across the cabin. "What does it say?" Emily asked, excitement creeping into her voice. Rachel hesitated, reading the translated text aloud. "Beware, sacred grounds. Power buried deep. Chosen one," she frowned, unsure what to make of it. "Chosen one? What does that mean?" Emily's eyes widened. "Do you think it's referring to you? The way the Varric acted, it's almost like they recognized you?" Rachel shook her head, dismissing the idea. "That's ridiculous. Why? Would they care about me?" But deep down, she couldn't ignore the possibility. The Varric had singled her out for a reason, and now their cryptic message hinted at something far greater than she'd imagined. Could she really be the chosen one mentioned in the text? Before she could dwell on it further, alarms blared throughout the ship. Everyone rushed to the control room, where Jake was already seated at the communications panel. His face was pale, his usual bravado replaced by unease. "They're contacting us," he said, his voice tense. "The Varric." On the main screen, a distorted image flickered to life. It was the leader of the Varric, its glowing yellow eyes piercing through the static. Its telepathic voice echoed in their minds, cold and commanding, "Leave this place." It warned, "Do not interfere with sacred grounds. Face the apex hunter if you defy us." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the crew in stunned silence. Jake broke the quiet first, slamming his fist on the console. See, I told you. They're hostile. We need to take them out before they attack us. No, Rachel said firmly, stepping forward. We don't understand them yet. Attacking will only make things worse, Jake glared at her. And sitting around decoding squiggles is going to save us? Wake up, Rachel. This isn't a game. Captain Lewis held up a hand, silencing both of them. Enough. We need to decide. As a team, but remember, we're explorers, not soldiers. Our goal is to learn, not start a war. In the end, the decision was made to wait. While Jake stewed in frustration, Rachel and Emily continued analyzing the alien message, hoping to uncover more clues. As night fell once again, Rachel found herself unable to sleep. Her thoughts kept returning to the Varak's warning and the mysterious phrase, Apex Hunter. Who or was it? And why did the Varak seem so determined to protect their secrets? Her musings were interrupted by a vivid dream. In it, she stood inside the temple, surrounded by glowing symbols that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. Before her loomed a massive figure, the Apex Hunter. Its jagged armor gleamed menacingly, and its golden eyes bore into hers. Yet instead of attacking, it tilted its head, studying her curiously. Then, in fragmented thoughts rather than words, it spoke. You, Key, it said, not weak. Rachel woke with a start, her heart pounding. The dream felt real, as though the Apex Hunter had reached out to her across space and time. For the first time, she began to wonder if the Varak's perception of her was different from what she and everyone else assumed. The next morning, she shared the dream with Emily, who listened intently. It sounds like they're trying to communicate with you, Emily said. Maybe you're the key to understanding them, Rachel sighed, rubbing her temples. I don't know. All I know is that we can't keep ignoring them. If we want answers, we'll have to face them sooner or later. Little did she realize that moment was closer than she thought. Back on the planet below, the Apex Hunter watched silently, its presence unseen but unmistakable. It had marked Rachel as significant, and it would not forget her. The next day aboard the Eclipse was tense. The crew had barely slept, their minds consumed by the Varak's warning and the looming threat of the Apex Hunter. Jake paced the control room like a caged animal, his frustration boiling over. He couldn't understand why they were hesitating. To him, the solution was clear. Strike first, ask questions later. We're wasting time. He snapped, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of the ship. Every second we sit here, those aliens are getting stronger. We need to act now. Captain. Lewis rubbed his temples, clearly exhausted from trying to mediate between Jake's aggression and Rachel's cautious approach. Jake, we've been over this. Charging in blind won't solve anything. If what Rachel found is true, the Varak aren't just mindless monsters. They have rules, warnings, and something they're protecting. We can't afford to ignore that. But we also can't afford to wait around. Jake shot back, slamming his fist on the table. They sent us a message threatening us with their Apex Hunter. Does that sound peaceful to you? They're daring us to fight. Rachel clenched her fists under the table, forcing herself to stay calm. She knew Jake wouldn't listen to her, but she couldn't stay silent either. Maybe it's not a dare, she said softly, her voice steady despite the nerves twisting inside her. Maybe it's a test. Jake scoffed, rolling his eyes. A test? Seriously? You think they're giving us a pop quiz or something? No, Rachel replied, meeting his gaze for the first time. I think they want to see how we'll respond. If we attack them without understanding, we'll prove we're no better than whatever threat they're guarding against. Jake opened his mouth to argue, but Captain Lewis raised a hand to stop him. Enough, he said firmly. Rachel's right, we need more information before we make any decisions. Until then, we hold our ground. Though Jake grumbled under his breath, he reluctantly backed down. For now, at least, the crew agreed to focus on analyzing the alien symbols and preparing for any possible confrontation. But everyone could feel the clock ticking, the pressure mounting with each passing hour. Later that evening, Rachel sat alone in the engineering bay, staring at the glowing screen of her tablet. The translated fragments of the Varak's message swirled in her mind, repeating themselves like a broken record. Beware sacred grounds. Power buried deep. Chosen one. What did it all mean? And why had the Varek leader singled her out? Her thoughts were interrupted by Emily, who entered the room holding 2 steaming cups of tea. "Thought you might need this," the medic said with a small smile, handing one to Rachel. "You've been working nonstop." "Thanks," Rachel murmured, taking a sip. The warmth helped soothe her frayed nerves, but it didn't ease the weight of her doubts. "I just wish I understood what they want from us." Emily sat down beside her, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe they don't know what they want yet. Maybe they're as confused about us as we are about them." Rachel shook her head. "It doesn't feel like that. When they looked at me, it was like they saw something I don't even see in myself." Emily tilted her head, studying Rachel carefully. "Do you really believe you're just the weak link everyone says you are?" The question caught Rachel off guard. She stared at her hands, unsure how to answer. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "But it's hard not to when people keep telling me I am." "Well, maybe it's time to stop listening to them," Emily said gently. "You've done more for this mission than anyone else. You saved Daniel's life. You decoded part of their language. And let's not forget you stood up to Jake, which none of us have the guts to do." Rachel managed a weak smile, grateful for Emily's support. But deep down, she still felt like an outsider, someone who didn't belong among the others. How could she be the chosen one when she struggled just to fit in? The next morning, the crew gathered in the main cabin to discuss their plan. Captain Lewis had decided it was time to return to the temple, but this time they would go prepared. Armed with weapons and protective gear, they hoped to gather more data while avoiding another violent encounter. "There's one condition," Captain Lewis said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Rachel stays behind." "What?" Jake exclaimed, throwing up his hands. "You're leaving weak link on the ship? That's rich." "It's not about weakness," Captain Lewis replied sharply. "Rachel's skills are too valuable to risk losing in a fight. If something goes wrong, we'll need her here to keep the ship running." Rachel felt a mix of relief and shame. On one hand, she was glad to avoid another confrontation with the Varek. On the other, she hated the idea of being left behind because everyone assumed she couldn't handle herself. As the team suited up and prepared to leave, Rachel stayed in the engineering bay, pretending to focus on her work. But her mind kept drifting back to the Varek and the cryptic message they'd sent. Something about it felt personal, like it was meant specifically for her. Hours passed, and the silence aboard the Eclipse grew oppressive. Rachel tried to distract herself by tinkering with the ship's systems, but her thoughts kept returning to the temple. What if the others were in danger? What if the apex hunter attacked them? She couldn't shake the feeling that she should be there, that her presence mattered more than anyone realized. Suddenly, the comms crackled to life. It was Jake, his voice strained and panicked. "We've got trouble." "The apex hunter, it's here?" Rachel's heart sank. Through the static, she could hear shouts and the sound of gunfire echoing in the background. Then, just as quickly as it had started, the transmission cut off, leaving only silence. For a moment, Rachel froze, fear gripping her chest. But then something inside her shifted. She couldn't just sit there and do nothing. Grabbing a handheld device loaded with the alien translations, she made her way to the airlock and suited up. If the others were in danger, she had to help, even if it meant facing the Varek and the apex hunter alone. When Rachel reached the temple, the scene before her was chaotic. The crew lay scattered across the floor, their weapons abandoned, in the dirt. Standing over them was the apex hunter, its massive form towering above everything else. Its jagged armor gleamed menacingly in the dim light, and its golden eyes burned with intensity. Jake was the first to notice Rachel's arrival. "What are you doing here?" he shouted, his voice trembling with anger and fear. "You're supposed to be on the ship." Rachel ignored him, her attention fixed on the apex hunter. Slowly, she stepped forward, placing herself between the creature and the rest of the crew. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to stand tall. To everyone's shock, the apex hunter paused. Instead of attacking, it tilted its head, studying Rachel with an almost curious expression. Then, without warning, it lowered its weapon and took a step back. "What's happening?" Jake whispered, his bravado crumbling. Why isn't it killing us? Rachel didn't answer. She could feel the apex hunter's presence in her mind, its thoughts brushing against hers like whispers in the dark. Though she couldn't understand the words, the message was clear. It recognized her. It had been waiting for her. As the apex hunter turned and disappeared into the shadows of the temple, Rachel let out a shaky breath. Whatever it wanted, it wasn't here to harm them, not yet, anyway. But she knew this wasn't the end. The Varak's warning still hung heavy in the air, and the mysteries of the temple remained unsolved. Turning to the others, Rachel spoke for the first time since arriving. We need to talk, she said, her voice firm despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Because I think I know why they let us live. For once, no one argued. Back on the Eclipse, the crew gathered in the main cabin to debrief after their harrowing encounter with the apex hunter. The air was thick with tension, and everyone's nerves were still raw from what had happened. Rachel stood at the center of the room, her hands gripping the edge of the table as she tried to steady herself. For once, no one interrupted her or dismissed her words. They listened intently, their eyes fixed on her. I think the Varak aren't just trying to scare. U.S., she began, her voice trembling slightly but growing stronger with each word. They're testing us. And I think they've been watching me since we got here. Jake frowned, leaning forward in his chair. What makes you so special? Why would they care about you? Rachel hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. She didn't fully understand it herself, but she knew she couldn't keep it hidden any longer. When the apex hunter looked at me, it wasn't like it was looking at an enemy, it was like it recognized me, like it knew something about me that even I... Don't know, Emily nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. That matches what we found in the alien text. Remember the part about the chosen one? Maybe that's what it meant. Captain Lewis rubbed his chin, his brow furrowed in deep thought. If that's true, then this isn't just about us exploring a planet. There's something bigger going on here, something tied to Rachel. The idea unsettled everyone, especially Jake. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his usual bravado replaced by unease. So what are you saying? That Rachel's some kind of alien messiah now? No, Rachel said quickly, shaking her head. I'm not saying that, I'm just saying maybe I'm the reason they let us live. Maybe I'm the key to understanding them. The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. No one wanted to admit it, but Rachel had a point. The Varak's actions didn't make sense unless there was something specific they were waiting for, or someone, over the next few days. Rachel threw herself into studying the alien symbols and the data they had collected. With Emily's help, she pieced together more fragments of the Varak's language, uncovering clues about their culture and history. The more she learned, the clearer it became that the temple wasn't just a structure, it was a gateway to something powerful buried deep beneath the planet's surface. They call it the core, Rachel explained during one of their late-night sessions in the engineering bay. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but her excitement was undeniable. It's described as a source of immense energy, capable of creating or destroying entire worlds. But it's locked away, protected by the Varak and their apex hunter. Emily frowned, flipping through the notes they had compiled. If it's so dangerous, why would they even tell us about it? Why not just keep it hidden? Because they need someone to unlock it, Rachel replied. At least that's what I think. The text keeps referring to a resonance, a connection between the core and whoever is meant to access it. I think that's where I come in. Emily stared at her, stunned. You mean, you think you're the one who can open it? Rachel shrugged, though her face betrayed her uncertainty. I don't know for sure, but everything points to me. The way the symbols reacted when I touched them, the way the apex hunter spared. All of it feels connected. Before Emily could respond, Captain Lewis entered the room, his expression grave. We've got a problem, he said, holding up a tablet displaying new readings from the planet's surface. The energy levels around the temple are spiking. Whatever's happening down there, it's escalating. Rachel felt a chill run down her spine. Do you think the Varak are trying to activate the core? It's possible, Captain Lewis admitted. But if they succeed, we might not be able to stop it. We need to figure out exactly what's going on and fast. The decision was made to return to the temple, this time with Rachel leading the mission. Though Jake protested loudly, arguing that sending her into danger was reckless, Captain Lewis overruled him. She's the only one who understands what's happening, he said firmly. If anyone can communicate with the Varric, it's her. As they prepared to leave, Rachel felt a mix of fear and determination. She knew the risks, they all did, but she also knew they couldn't turn back now. The fate of the planet and possibly the universe rested in their hands. When they arrived at the temple, the atmosphere was different. The air seemed heavier, charged with an almost electric energy. The glowing symbols on the walls pulsed brighter than before, casting eerie shadows across the chamber. At the center of the room stood the apex hunter, its golden eyes gleaming as it watched them approach. Rachel stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "I need to speak with your leader," she said aloud, hoping the Varric could understand. To her surprise, the apex hunter bowed its head slightly, stepping aside to allow them deeper into the temple. Inside, they found the Varric leader waiting for them. Its presence was commanding, its telepathic voice echoing in their minds. "You have returned," it said, its tone unreadable. "Why do you defy our warning?" Rachel took a deep breath, steadying herself. "We came to understand. To learn, you called me the weak link, but I don't believe that's true. I think I'm meant to help you protect the core." The Varric leader tilted its head, studying her curiously. "You carry resonance within you," it said finally. "A fragile yet immense power. Few possess such balance." Rachel nodded, encouraged by the acknowledgement. "Tell me what I need to do," she said. "How can I help?" The leader gestured toward the far end of the chamber, where a massive crystalline artifact rested atop a pedestal. Its surface shimmered with shifting colors, radiating waves of energy that made the air vibrate. "The core is ancient," the Varric explained. "It holds the essence of creation and destruction. Only those with resonance may approach it without harm. Yet many seek to exploit its power, threatening the balance of existence." Rachel glanced at the others, who stood frozen in awe. She turned back to the Varric. "And you think I'm the one who can protect it?" The leader hesitated, its glowing eyes narrowing. "Perhaps, but beware, the path ahead is perilous. Once chosen, there is no turning back." Rachel swallowed hard, knowing this was the moment of truth. She stepped forward, leaving the others behind as she approached the core. As she drew closer, the artifact began to hum, its light intensifying until it enveloped her completely. Images flooded her mind, visions of planets being born and destroyed, civilizations rising and falling. She saw the potential for both beauty and devastation held in perfect equilibrium. And she understood, the core wasn't just a source of power, it was a test of character. Those who sought to control it risked unleashing chaos, while those who respected its balance could use it to heal and create. When the light faded, Rachel found herself standing alone in the chamber. The Varric leader and the apex hunter were gone, leaving only silence behind. Slowly, she turned to face the others, her expression resolute. "We can't take the core," she said firmly. "It's too dangerous. But we can leave it here, under the Varric's protection. They're the guardians it needs." Jake opened his mouth to argue, but Captain Lewis silenced him with a raised hand. "She's right," he said. "This isn't ours to claim. Our job is to report back to Earth and ensure no one else tries to interfere." As they made their way back to the eclipse, Rachel felt a sense of peace she hadn't known before. She had faced her fears, proven her worth, and earned the respect of beings far greater than herself. Though the journey ahead would be long, she knew she had changed, not just in the eyes of others, but in her own. For the first time, Rachel truly believed she was more than the weak link. She was the key. The journey back to the eclipse was quiet, each crew member lost in their own thoughts. The weight of what had happened at the temple lingered heavily in the air. Rachel walked ahead of the group, her steps steady despite the exhaustion that tugged at her body and mind. She could feel the others watching her, their expressions a mix of awe and uncertainty. For the first time, she wasn't shrinking under their gaze. Instead, she held her head high, knowing she had earned their respect. When they reached the ship, Captain Lewis gathered everyone in the control room for one final meeting before departure. "We've done all we can here," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Our mission was to investigate the energy readings, and we've uncovered far more than we expected. Now it's time to return home and report our findings." Jake leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his usual cockiness replaced by a rare seriousness. "And what exactly are we supposed to tell them?" he asked, glancing at Rachel. "That we met some aliens who think she's some kind of cosmic guardian?" "They'll never believe us," Captain Lewis nodded. "Then we stick to the facts. We described the temple, the Varric, and the core. We emphasized the danger of interfering with their world. Earth doesn't need to know everything, not yet." Rachel appreciated the captain's tact. She wasn't ready to share the full extent of what had happened, not even with herself. The visions she'd experienced near the core still lingered in her mind, haunting and beautiful at the same time. She knew she carried a responsibility now, one she didn't fully understand but couldn't ignore. As the eclipse lifted off from the planet's surface, Rachel stared out the viewport, watching the jagged landscape shrink into the distance. The glowing symbols on the temple walls flickered faintly before disappearing entirely beneath the swirling clouds of dust. Somewhere deep within the structure, the apex hunter stood watchful, its golden eyes gleaming like twin suns. Though she couldn't see it, Rachel felt its presence. A silent promise that the Varric would continue to guard the core and trust her to honor their bond. Back on Earth, the crew debriefed with top officials from the space agency. The room was cold and sterile, filled with men and women in suits who listened intently as Captain Lewis recounted their story. Rachel sat quietly beside him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She had prepared for this moment, rehearsing how she would explain her role without revealing too much. But when the questions turned to her, she found herself speaking honestly, driven by a newfound confidence. "They called me the weak link," she admitted, meeting the skeptical gazes of the officials. "But I wasn't. None of us were. The Varric saw something in me, something none of us understood at first. And because of that, they trusted me to protect what matters most." The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. One of the officials, a stern woman with sharp features, leaned forward. "So you're saying these aliens entrusted you with the fate of an entire planet?" Rachel hesitated, then nodded. "Not just a planet, something bigger. Something that could affect all of us if it falls into the wrong hands." The officials exchanged uneasy glances, clearly unsure how to proceed. Finally, the woman spoke again. "Very well. We'll take your report under advisement. But let me make one thing clear. Humanity won't stand idly by while other species hold power over us. If there's a threat or an opportunity, we will act." Rachel felt a pang of unease but kept her composure. "With all due respect," she said, her voice steady, "the Varric aren't a threat. They're guardians. And they've been doing their job long before we ever arrived. All they want is peace." The woman raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "We'll see about that." After the debriefing, the crew returned to their normal lives, though nothing felt quite the same. Jake avoided Rachel for days, his pride bruised by the realization that he hadn't been the hero he imagined himself to be. Emily, on the other hand, stayed close, checking in regularly to make sure Rachel was coping with everything. "You did good," she told her one evening, handing her a cup of tea. "Better than any of us could have." Rachel smiled faintly, grateful for the support. "I don't know if I did enough," she admitted. "What if they decide to go back?" "What? If they try to take the core?" Emily sighed, sitting down beside her. "Then we'll deal with it when it happens. For now, focus on yourself." "You've been through a lot," Rachel nodded, though her mind remained restless. She couldn't shake the feeling that her journey wasn't over, that the Varric's message had only begun to unfold. Weeks passed, and life began to settle into a routine. But Rachel's dreams were anything but ordinary. Every night she found herself back in the temple, standing before the core, its light pulsed rhythmically, calling to her like a heartbeat. Sometimes the apex hunter appeared, its towering form, casting long shadows across the chamber. It never spoke, but its presence was enough a reminder of the promise she had made. One evening, as she lay awake staring at the ceiling, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from Captain Lewis. "We need to talk." The text read simply. Her heart raced as she dressed quickly and headed to his office. When she arrived, he was already waiting, his expression grave. On the desk in front of him lay a stack of documents, their contents marked with red stamps labeled classified. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Captain Lewis sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "They're planning another mission to the same planet. Officially, it's a research expedition. Unofficially," he trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Rachel's stomach sank. "They're going after the core." He nodded grimly. "I tried to stop them, but orders came from higher up. They don't care about the Varric or their warnings. All they see is power, and they'll do whatever it takes to get it." Rachel clenched her fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. This is exactly what the Varric were afraid of. If they try to take the core, they'll destroy everything. "I know," Captain Lewis said softly, "which is why I need your help. You're the only one who can stop them." For a moment, Rachel froze, overwhelmed by the enormity of the task. Then, slowly, she nodded. "What do you need me to do?" The plan was risky, but they had no other choice. Using her knowledge of the alien language and the data they had collected, Rachel created a detailed report outlining the dangers of tampering with the core. She included translations of the Varric's warnings, emphasizing the catastrophic consequences of ignoring them. With Captain Lewis's help, she presented the report directly to the highest-ranking officials. Bypassing the usual channels. At first, they dismissed her claims, labeling them as speculative and exaggerated. But Rachel refused to back down. Drawing on every ounce of courage she possessed, she stood before the council and delivered a speech that left no room for doubt. "This isn't about politics or power," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "It's about survival. The Varric entrusted me with their secret because they believed in humanity's potential for good. If we betray that trust, if we exploit the core for selfish gain, we'll prove them wrong. And we'll doom ourselves in the process." Her words struck a chord. Slowly, reluctantly, the officials began to listen. By the end of the presentation, the room was silent, the gravity of the situation sinking in. In the weeks that followed, the mission to the planet was postponed indefinitely. Though the decision wasn't permanent, it bought them time and hope. As Rachel walked home that night, the city lights twinkling around her, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known. In months, the road ahead would be challenging, but she was ready. She had faced her fears, proven her strength, and earned the respect of beings far greater than herself. Somewhere in the vast expanse of space, the Varric watched silently, their faith in her unwavering. And somewhere deep within her, Rachel knew she had become more than the weak link. She was the key, and she would use that power wisely.